Hi there, my name is Claire Decker. For this assignment, I have chosen to research the barriers to mental health services that are experienced by the refugee community. This presentation specifically addresses the Somali refugee community and interventions to work towards making mental health services more appealing and accessible to this community. To begin, I would like to discuss my findings from the analysis of the refugee community. The definition of a refugee is a person who has been forced to flee their country due to war, persecution, or natural disaster. Persecution may be due to race, nationality, religion, membership to a particular social group, or political opinion. It has been estimated that 30,000 refugees have been resettled in Ohio since 2002. Additionally, Columbus, Ohio, which is my hometown, has the second largest Somali refugee population with around 45,000 members. As you can imagine, the life experiences of a refugee are challenging and often painful. Due to this, I want to take a moment to contemplate the refugee experience and how it can impact the mental health of refugees. For a moment, just put yourself in the shoes of a refugee. Imagine that you have experienced some kind of trauma. You may have been forced to leave your home, your family may have been separated from you, and then just as you were adjusting and assimilating into a new culture, you are faced with additional stressors of finding a job, learning English, paying bills, taking care of your family, and also knowing how to care for yourself too. These are all common experiences that refugees go through pre-migration, during migration, and post-resettlement. Due to many of these experiences, refugees are at risk of mental health challenges such as anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, demoralization, and disillusionment. The identified problem is that refugees experience barriers to mental health services. I want to emphasize that barriers will vary individually and culturally, and there are some barriers that may exist in some communities that do not exist in other communities. For this presentation, I'm focusing specifically on the barriers experienced by the Somali refugee community. Research documented in a study titled Beyond Stigma, Barriers to Discussing Mental Health in the Refugee Population found that many Somali refugees experience barriers to accessing mental health services. These barriers included cultural stigmas about mental health, fear of what might happen if someone found out they were seeking help, lack of transportation to and from appointments, feelings of shame about needing help, language barriers, lack of access to interpreters, and cultural beliefs or norms about personal problems and needs and how to address them. The Somali community is very nuclear and relies closely on family for support, and to go outside of the family or close community is very unfamiliar and probably uncomfortable to many Somali refugees. Additionally, religion is also a huge source of comfort and healing for this community, and many Somali refugees turn to the Quran and Allah rather than to a psychologist or more clinical talk therapy. The proposed intervention plan is to create psychoeducational workshops and support groups that will be hosted by local resettlement agencies and organizations that work in the Somali community in Franklin County. These workshops and support groups would be supported and facilitated by therapists, social workers, and specialists who work and specialize in the subjects that are being discussed. A big part of the success of this program will be based on community partnerships with respected leaders in the Somali community, such as imams from local mosques, respected people of authority in the Somali community, and other organizations who are already working closely with this population. The psychoeducational workshop and support groups would focus on topics that are relevant to the Somali refugee community, which could include things like parenting, family training, resettlement experiences, health and wellness, stress management, prayer and the Quran, and possibly even storytelling groups to share testimonies and experiences. These groups would be utilized to cultivate community, support, connection, belonging, and to facilitate discussion about important topics. Additionally, optional home visits would be available for any participant who would like to have a follow-up visit with a therapist or social worker to further discuss the topic or content of the workshop or support group, or just to connect and have somebody to support them. As mentioned previously, the barrier and need that will be addressed through this intervention plan are barriers to the mental health experiences that are experienced by the Somali refugee community. Barriers can include language, cultural beliefs, stigma, shame or fear, difficulty navigating the system, lack of awareness or knowledge of services, and lack of or access to transportation or childcare. The logic model assumptions are that Somali refugees experience barriers to accessing mental health services. Organizations and community members should come together to participate in alternative mental health services to resolve mental health problems through a culturally appropriate program. Another assumption is that alternatives to mental health services have the ability to provide culturally appropriate services that create connection, belonging, community, and opportunity for healing and growth. Somali refugees can benefit from these opportunities as these opportunities provide space for refugees to engage, process experiences, and find communion with others in a format that is comfortable and respectful to their cultural norms, traditions, and beliefs. For the input section of the logic model, there were a variety of factors that were identified that would lead to a successful and beneficial program. The factors that were identified are funding, securing a facility, having consistent, accurate, and culturally appropriate interpretation services, scheduling speakers, therapists, and social workers, finding partnerships with community members, getting endorsement from local imams and respected community leaders, putting together resource handouts with lists of all of the resources in the community that refugees can access, providing information on transportation such as bus schedules, information on Uber or Lyft or taxi services, or even trying to facilitate carpooling. Another area that needs to be addressed is childcare and childcare providers. To meet the barrier of refugee families being unable to attend sessions because they have children, it would be ideal to have childcare provided for this program. So therefore, we would need to find a childcare provider. Also provided wouldn't be halal snacks or tea. And the reason why that is listed is because having snacks and tea is a very culturally appropriate and consistent way of building community and joining in fellowship together. So in order to bring some familiarity and comfort, I would like to provide those things. The last thing that was listed are writing and technological supplies to assist in any presentations or activities that might be completed by participants. For the activities portion of the logic model, I have identified a variety of activities that I would like to complete during this intervention. The first is that I would like the program length to be 1 year for approximately one time a month. These would be 90-minute long meetings, and there would be optional home visits with social workers or therapists during off weeks if participants were interested. During the workshops and support groups, there would be focus groups that would be centered around topics that are relevant to the community. There would be a speaker series where people from the community could come in and speak on certain topics. We would bring in specialists or people who are able to provide more knowledge and information on certain areas of interest. There would be discussion facilitated between members, between facilitators and members, and lots of open communication. We would provide community resource handouts so that the refugees who are present and participating are provided with information on different things that they can access through their community and how to access them. And then last, we would partake in eating a snack and drinking tea together. This is a very culturally appropriate thing, as I mentioned earlier, and this is an activity that I would like to implement in every workshop and support group so that it brings the level of comfort and just makes people feel a little bit more at home. For the reach portion of the logic model, I would like our target community to be Somali refugees. We would create 2 community groups, one group for males that would be led by male facilitators, and one group for females, which would be led by female facilitators. The reason for this is to eliminate any barriers that might exist due to gender discomfort or perhaps even hesitancy in discussing certain topics in front of the opposite gender. Ideally, we would like to have 8 to 10 participants per group and would be open to more if there was interest in that. However, we would definitely like to keep it smaller just to ensure more comfortability and being able to have more open communication. For the outcomes portion of the logic model, I have identified short-term outcomes, intermediate outcomes, and long-term outcomes. The short-term outcomes for this intervention are connection, finding belonging, gaining knowledge, and a change in opinion or attitude. The intermediate outcomes are increased self-care and well practice and continued support groups. The long-term outcomes are improved mental health conditions and reduction of mental health stigma in the community. We have now come to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to listen to this presentation and to consider this proposal. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is listed on the slide, and I look forward to potentially hearing from you. Thank you.